Hello everyone, this is Erin, and today I'll be recreating this very colorful piece of concept art made by Mary Blair for Disney's 1950 Alice in Wonderland. And here I am looking a little dorky, teaching a gouache class over the last 2 weekends to a group of amazing women who all attempted to recreate this piece. None of them had used gouache before. It was such an incredible experience. So thank you to the Richmond Women's Relief Resource Center. And yeah, let's get started. So I have my gouache. I've got my flathead, my round brush, my palettes, paper towel. I've got some white acrylic, my piece of concept art that I'm working from. And we're going to start by blocking in some colors. So this piece is interesting. It's, a lot of colors, but everything's blocked out into these very specific shapes. So it was actually a pretty easy piece to start with because you just block in these various shapes, starting with yellow and then adding a little bit of red to create the orange color. And I think I did 2 coats of each color, always remembering to let the first coat dry completely. And I challenged myself to paint as quickly as possible. So although I have sped up the video a little bit, I wanted to sort of test myself and see if I could just really go for it very loosely, and sort of preparing myself to teach a class to a group of people who had never used gouache before. And I had a very limited amount of time, so we had to create this whole piece in just under 4 hours. So, which sounds like a lot of time, but, teaching people about gouache first and getting them to do some swatches and just getting used to the medium before painting and then going step by step. We really needed to be able to do this quickly. So I've just added a little bit of cyan now to the yellow. So we're really just starting with a primary set of colors. We've got the true red, we've got primary yellow, and then I've got the cyan, which is a cool blue. And yeah, making this second green. And what I did there is I wet my brush and then I blended the 2 greens together just so that the back is a little mottled, a little bit blended. And that's the way you want to blend gouache, is you want to go wet into wet. This is acrylic gouache, so once it dries, it cannot be reactivated. So it is a little tougher to blend acrylic gouache. If you have traditional gouache, it reactivates when you add moisture to it, so it is easier to blend. You don't have to be as quick. This, again, because I'm going extra fast and trying to do it without being too picky, my blending doesn't look incredible, but once you get the other elements over top of it, you really, you can see that things do not have to be blended perfectly to produce something that looks fun and intentional. Okay, so now we're starting on our purples. We're going to be doing some purples here. So I've got my primary magenta, which is a cool red. And to make a nice true purple, or this sort of lilac pink that I'm starting with here, you really want to have that cool red and then a warm blue. So I have the ultramarine blue there, and then I have some true red, and I'm mixing that with a little bit of the magenta. What have I been saying? Have I been saying magenta this whole time? Maybe I'm just saying cool red. But you mix those 2 together with some white to get that very bubblegum pink and some of the flower details up there on the orange. And so next up, we're creating a lighter yellow to do these little tulips. And this part was so fun in the class when I was teaching my students. They all did this a little differently, and I thought that was really cool to see. I had 10 students, so to see 10 different versions of this piece. But I really noticed that when we got into doing these details, everyone, did it a little differently and sort of allowed their creativity to shine. And I thought that was exciting, and people added a lot of flowers and added details to the flowers that weren't in the original piece. And I think that was so great for me to see that. Because you really can have fun with these, right? Like, they're replicants, but also it's a great opportunity to practice doing things and adding things. So with those tulips, I did 2 coats. And as always, first coat needs to dry completely before you do a second coat, unless you're trying to blend things, because you could risk picking up your paint underneath. And those stems there, I went with a lighter green so that it would show up against that dark green background. In the original piece, it's a little different. The stems are brighter and lighter than, or brighter and darker than the background. So I did it in reverse, but that's okay. That was my own little take on the stems. So again, making another nice bright purple. We've got our ultramarine, we've got some magenta, and I'm putting in a little bit of black to deepen it, and some white. So we're starting on, I believe we're going to do the big flowers now. And these big flowers are quite deep in color. So that's where we bring in a little bit of black. But when you're using black, of course, you want to be really careful and just put a tiny bit at a time into your mix. And always mix dark colors into light. Like you want to mix the magenta into the white first, and then a little bit of your ultramarine and a little bit of black, and just slowly adding a little bit at a time. But you always want to go dark colors into light. And you can see that I'm doing this entire piece with one brush. So I did get out my flathead brush. I might use it later for the road. I can't remember, but it's nice to use a number 6. I love a number 6 brush, as many of you know already, because it holds a lot of paint, but you can get a really nice fine tip. And yeah, you know how I feel about a fine tip. And there it is. Like, look at that. It makes such a nice shape at the end of the flower there. And it's, it is an exercise in pressure. So the more pressure, the flatter your brush will be, or the bigger it will be. Those bristles will spread out. So if you're not putting a lot of pressure on your brush, you get a nice pointy shape. And here, doing this little section down here of this kind of a muted hot pink. So muted hot pink, of course, well, not of course, but you're adding the magenta to a little tiny bit of ultramarine, a little bit of black and white. So it does tone it down a little bit. But here we go. So I've got the wet surface, and now I'm going to add another wet paint here, this darker purple, and then I'm going to blend the two together using like a mid-tone sort of, and a brighter pink there, just to create this mottled background behind the flowers. And yeah, so in that case, I had 3 different colors there and just sort of blending them together, but not worrying about them looking too blended. I wanted a little bit of this sort of texture showing. And then this burgundy, it's the same colors, ultramarine, the magenta, the black, the white, but this time with more black. And I believe I put in a little bit of true red as well. So I get a little bit more of an eggplant, sort of aubergine purple. And blocking in these leaves here, I remember, that eventually I'm going to be putting black around them. So they do not need to be precise at all. It's just blocking in the background there. And trusting that once I put the black in, it will not look as ugly. All paintings go through their ugly phase, their little ugly duckling phase, but then it'll be beautiful, sort of. Okay, so now we're mixing up a brighter version of this purple, because I realized it was looking a little bit on the red side, a little bit drab. So I just darkened it, deepened it, deep and dark and delicious. And there we go. It's such a cool piece. I've been waiting to do this piece for a while. I was sort of intimidated, but then when I learned that I was going to be doing this class, I thought, well, this would be a good one because it is color blocking, which is easy, starting with shapes and then getting that sort of idea in your head that it's all shapes. Even when we get down to painting Alice herself, it's just a series of shapes. So I thought, well, this is a good way to start. And it's also a great exercise in mixing color. Not only, the tertiary colors like green and purple and orange, but also more nuanced colors like different kinds of purple and, that eggplant color. And then we've got different shades of gray. And it's interesting, with gray, no gray is just straight up black and white. You can just mix black and white together, but black usually has a blue bias. So you'll have a slightly bluish gray. But if you add a little bit of yellow to that, you're going to get a gray that has a green bias. And if you add a little bit of red, it's a warmer gray, So playing here with a gray that is slightly more on the warm side. And then these dark details, sorry, I cut off there a little bit. And just quickly, letting the brush just really dictate that shape of the stroke, that sort of like swoosh My little swoosh there. I don't think I flicked this time. As some of you know, I have a signature move, the swoosh and flick. I don't think there are any swoosh and flicks in this piece. This blue, so this is ultramarine with a tiny bit of black and white, like just a little bit of gray to tone it down, so that when I do the spine on the inside of the leaves, the spine is ultramarine with a small bit of white, but no black. So it pops. It really pops against the background, which is slightly more diminished. And when we say diminished, we mean a tonal hue, something that has a little bit of gray in it, so that it's not as bright and vibrant and saturated. So when you desaturate, you can also say that it's a diminished hue. And so bringing in these plants here. And, I don't draw anything out first. And, well, sometimes I do, but in this case I didn't. And neither did any of the students. And they were really uncomfortable about that at first. But it's about looking where things are placed in relation to each other. So with those blue leaves, I was like, okay, that middle blue leaf goes way over the green in the background, and just allowing those preliminary shapes that I put down to dictate where I put the next shapes. You know what I mean? So it's like, where does everything go in relation to everything else? And paying attention to that, things end up where they should be. And it's just a great exercise in focus. And I find these pieces, it is meditative, but it's also, very active. You're actively paying attention. But in that active attention, there's this sort of sense of peace and ease, because you don't have any space in your brain for anything else when you're doing a replicant. These flowers were interesting because I realized that they were blue underneath. You can see that she started them blue and then changed them to white. And that, you see that throughout a lot of her concept art. You can see her thought process. You can see her changing things as she goes. And because these were very quickly done and she did a ton of them, you get to sort of see where she made changes, but she wasn't too concerned with, changing it so that it's perfect. So you can kind of see her process, which I think is really cool. So this walkway that Alice is on, it appears to be white, but it's not. It's gray. And when we get the dark gray on, which represents like the shadowed area, that lighter gray does look white. It does appear more white anyway in comparison to this darker area. So when I started off with that lighter gray, I was like, ooh, this is really gray. But then when the darker gray went down, it looked correct. It looked better. So, it is tough to really, I don't want to say, to assess what a color is until it has other colors around it. Colors will look very different depending on what they are next to. I just thought that was interesting that gray area, this lighter area, looks so much lighter now that we have the shadow down. So just doing a second coat, and usually with gouache you do 2 or 3 coats if you want that nice opaque finish, which I do here. I just wanted to mention that Mary Blair's work for Alice in Wonderland, it really helped to set the mood for the whole film. Disney was so adamant about having her style, her expressive, creative style in his movies. But it was very difficult for the other animators to incorporate her style because it was so flat. She has this very flat sort of cutout look, and it was difficult for them to animate that. There's one scene in the film where it really shines through that sort of flat look, and that's when Alice is with the Queen of Hearts, and they're, all the cards and like the playing card soldiers and all of that part was very flat. So they were really able to incorporate her style in that, but also throughout the whole film, her color choices, her sort of lighting ideas, the mood, even the costume design, all of that comes through. And it really, in my opinion, comes through in the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, and also through the gardens, like when she's walking, through the forest and all the flowers. And then when she runs into the caterpillar, all that it's so Mary Blair to me. Here we have the black, and now that we're putting that down, everything starts to come together, right? As always, the black is like the magic final touch, although we do still have to paint Mary, but just this area here, it's like starts to look so refined and not as messy And then this fun little detail around the flowers. And getting in here, and you can see just how fine of a point my brush makes. And then I'm just very, very careful holding my brush super close to the bristles to get more control. And I do have a steady hand. I have to say I hold my breath a lot when I'm painting. I don't know if I recommend that, but I think it's common practice. These stripes, these details, I guess, yeah, we can call them stripes, horizontal, and sort of these two thick stripes. I had to fix them because I realized after I painted them, this is where I probably should have used a smaller brush. So I fixed them up, and you can see me here just sort of painting over them, which is one of the wonderful things about gouache, is that it is opaque, so you can correct mistakes. So I do that here. I paint over the thickness, and then I do that a couple of times. And I think it looks cool. It turned out fine. But yeah, I shouldn't be so lazy and just get out a smaller brush. Like a number 2 would have been perfect for those lines. But yeah, that fixed it. I was so impressed. You'll see at the end of the video, I show clips of the students, like some of their work, and I was just so impressed with how they were able to do the finer details without tiny brushes. I should also mention that I am teaching another round of my replicant Zoom classes, which start next Sunday. I only have one spot left, but if you're interested, I'll put a link in the description below. It's a 6-week course, 2 hours a week, lots of fun, Sunday mornings from 10 to noon. Okay, now we're doing Alice's face, and this was the part that everyone was super nervous about, of course, but just like everything else, it's a series of shapes. However, these shapes are very small. And the color of Alice's skin is white, true red, a little bit of yellow. And we do several coats. So right now it looks really gross. Her face looks super bumpy and crinkly, and actually kind of looks like my face right now. My face is looking kind of bumpy and crinkly, but but we'll get another coat on there and it'll be better. But check this out. Like, look at her little dress. It's like a circle for the puff sleeve, a little tiny line for the neck part, and then we sort of assess where it'll be in space so that I leave a spot for the apron. Now I could have painted the whole thing blue and just put the apron over top of it, because gouache does cover up, like the white gouache would have covered the blue, but I didn't, which I probably should have. I don't know what I was thinking, but it worked. Couple coats, and we'll get her face looking a little bit less gross. Yeah, again, smaller brush, Erin. Don't be afraid. But I think right there I was trying to I was drying out my brush a little bit and getting some more yellow on there for her hair. But you can see her face needs yet another coat, and there, doesn't look as creepy. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say it's creepy. You know, it's weird. It's weird when you can see streaks of green coming out from underneath. And then her little apron, using white. I'm using white acrylic that's matte. This Liquitex stuff, it says gouache on the bottle, but it is not gouache. It's not gouache. It's not made up of the same binder that gouache has traditionally. And I'm not sure if there's any chalk in it, but it is matte. So perhaps there is some chalk in it, but it works just like gouache. And since I go through so much white gouache, I bought the Liquitex because it was more affordable. And there we go. Her little legs are so cute. So yeah, this is tricky doing this part because she is quite small, and getting the proportions right, but also that sort of lean that she has. She's doing this sort of lean forward, which gives her a sense of movement. The positioning of her legs and her shoes, although very, simple, really does change the whole feeling, right? Like of what kind of movement she's making. I just darkened the hair color, the skin color basically, and so that I could do the features. Some of my students gave her lipstick. They kept saying, "Oh, I'm putting lipstick on her," which was so cute. And they just put little red lips on her. And I had one student put sunglasses on her because she said she kind of ruined the eyes and then decided to just give her sunglasses, which actually looked super cute. And I believe I shared that picture at the end here. But there we go. It's all done. So let's take the tape off. Woohoo! Looking good. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Just stick around here for a minute. We can see what my students did. Oh, I forgot to put a little bit of these bright pink elements here. This sort of weird hot pink grass. So cool. And there we go. All done. All right. Here are some pieces done by my students. They're so freaking cute. Go watch Alice in Wonderland and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.